Hello everyone, my name is Gabby, and today I'm going to be bringing you my review of Dear Evan Hansen the Novel by Val Emmich with Stephen Levinson, Benj Pasek, and Justin Paul. I'm bringing you this review as part of a promotion that I'm doing with NOVL and Teenreads, so thank you so much to both of them for partnering up with me and a whole bunch of other members on the team board to get to read Dear Evan Hansen early, get to review it on my channel, get to do a little bit of stuff for Teenreads, and to be able to promote it on my social media. As you all may know, I'm a huge fan of Dear Evan Hansen, the Broadway musical, from which this book is based off of, and I've done a few videos on my channel about that Broadway show. I did the Dear Evan Hansen book tag that I created myself, which now has close to or over 1,500 views, which is absolutely insane. And then I did a review of the Broadway show, which I got to see 4 days before the Tony Awards, so if you'd like to check both of those out, they will be linked down below. So of course, because I have that love for the Broadway show, I'm coming into this book with definitely a lot more hindsight than most people would. So for this book to be novelized means it's going to reach a whole new audience of people who are completely and entirely unfamiliar with the story. So I want to spend this review talking about some of the changes from the Broadway show to the book and getting to pretty much inform you guys and expose you to the story with the hindsight and the information that I have coming into it, being a huge fan of the Broadway show that I am. And that's pretty much what I did in my non-spoiler review that I got to do for Teenreads. That's a full-length non-spoiler review. So if you would like to go and check that out, I will have the link down below, and I go in there and sort of discuss why the certain changes are made and be able to provide a little bit of more in-depth analysis instead of discussing the actual plot points that were changed, which is what I want to do in this review, which is going to be more spoiler contained. Just because I didn't want to waste this entire video talking about things that I've already talked about in that non-spoiler review. So if you would like to go and check it out, the link will be down below, and I think that that would be a really great place to start before you come and watch the spoiler review, because you'll get a lot of understanding as to why certain changes were made in this book and what the difference is between having to tell the story with a Broadway show and having to tell it with a novel, because while the storytelling method may still be a little bit the same, it's quite a different format, which constitutes a significant amount of changes that need to be made in the storytelling process from taking a Broadway musical and adapting it into a novel, which I feel like is a relatively rare occurrence. So before I dive into spoilers and discussing some of the big plot points within this book, let me give you a brief synopsis. Dear Evan Hansen follows our title character, Evan Hansen, and he is a senior in high school that suffers with severe social anxiety and depression. In order to cope with his mental health struggles, Evan has a therapist named Dr. Sherman that advises him to write letters to himself, which is where the title Dear Evan Hansen comes from. That's how Evan addresses every single one of the letters that he writes to himself. And this is a way for him to be able to release his emotions and to be honest with himself and how he's feeling, rather than bottling everything up and sort of denying the struggles that he's going through. On his first day of his senior year of high school, Evan writes one of these letters and ends up getting in the hands of the misunderstood Connor Murphy, who a lot of kids judge. There's a lot of really bad stories surrounding him. He gets a hold of Evan's letter, sees it, freaks out, runs off with it, and that whole event propels the entire rest of the narrative. And because of Connor's actions, Evan ends up reaching viral fame, and now he's in a spotlight that he's never been in before, because Evan was always the kid in the back that was ignored. So now he has everyone's eyes on him, and he has to be able to confront and socialize with people and do things that he's never done before. So he's constantly questioning his actions and his motives and his decisions and if he's done the right thing because of this sort of pathway that Connor Murphy and his family have put him on. And this book deals with so many existential life questions, dealing with social media and the way that we communicate, and dealing with family and the way that we have relationships with our parents, and the ways that we have relationships, friends, and loved ones in terms of like significant others. The story deals with wanting to be seen and heard and found, and if it really matters if people know your name or if you just have a few people out there that love you and care about you. So many big life questions that I could spend hours and hours discussing, and I think the Broadway show does such a beautiful job at hitting on all of them, and I think the novel does as well. There's definitely not one that I love more than the other now that I've consumed both stories. I think that they're actually both relatively different, but each hold a special place in my heart because of the information and the story that they've given me. I'm really grateful that both are out in the world, because now that this novel exists, there's going to be a whole new audience of people that are going to be exposed to Dear Evan Hansen in the story, which has completely changed my life. I remember when I picked up the script for the show written by Stephen Levinson for the first time, and there was lines of that dialogue that I read that just hit me, because it was the first time that I was getting to see myself depicted in such an honest way. There's lines that I read that I had said myself or thought myself that I'd never seen depicted anywhere else that really shocked me, because I thought I was the only one who said those things, who thought those things, and I was being proven that I wasn't the only one, and that's what the entire show looks to do. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And now, if there's going to be more people who are going to get the opportunity to experience that, I could not be more grateful. and ecstatic because I love this show so much. I love the book. I'm so grateful I got the opportunity to read it early. Just, I'm filled with so much love and gratitude because of this world, and it's just completely changed my life. So I'm very excited to dive in and discuss some of the big plot points of this book and freak out and fangirl with all of you. So if you have not read Dear Evan Hansen the novel yet, go and pick it up. It is in stores now, and I will leave all the links down below where you can go and get yourself a copy. Benj and Justin are also touring with Val Emmich, and if you would like to go and see them, I will leave all of the tour dates down below. I am going to be at the Chicago stop, which is happening on Friday, so if you are going to be there as well, definitely come and say hi. I would love to see you. But I think with that all being said, I want to dive right in and discuss some spoilers, so I'm going to say goodbye to the non-spoiler people, and I hope you guys enjoy the novel. First things first, I feel like I have to start out by discussing Connor's point of view, because that really is the biggest addition to this story from the Broadway musical. So let's sort of talk about the differences here, shall we? In the Broadway musical, Connor has like 1 or 2 scenes in the very, very beginning of the show, and then he ends up committing suicide. And the rest of the time that we see him throughout the entire show, he's sort of a figment of Evan's imagination. Every single time you see Connor, he appears to be able to serve whatever purpose Evan needs him for, whether it be for the Connor Project or it be some sort of morale boost, like am I making the right decision in lying to Connor's family, in lying to my mom. And Evan uses Connor as a way to sort of justify his actions. And Evan's not the only character that does this. You see a moment in the second act of the musical when Jared sort of wants to shove himself into this friendship that Evan and Connor supposedly have, and that's where you have the Sincerely Me reprise. That's literally all about Jared wanting to make himself a part of the narrative, and Evan basically pushing him out and saying, like, you were never in the story, this is not about you, and sort of showing the egotistical and sort of self-obsessed nature that Evan has formed because of the Connor Project and the social media attention that he's been getting. And the Connor that you see in the Sincerely Me reprise is the Connor that Jared would like him to be. You see that the Murphys themselves create versions of Connor that they would like. He is just a sort of construction of what everyone else in his life would want him to be, but you never see any version of him. You don't get any of his internal thoughts. You know nothing about him than what you see in the first few scenes of the musical, which sort of look to fulfill a lot of the stereotypes that people have established about him. So to be honest, if you look at Connor Murphy as a character in the musical, you know absolutely nothing about him other than what other people have said, and how trustworthy is that information? It really isn't. And that's what this book goes to prove by actually getting to see Connor's perspective and get inside his head and find out about his background. And we learn so much more about his character than we ever do in the musical, and it was wonderful. So in the book, Connor is a ghost, and there are moments when Evan is narrating and telling his story and he acts like he sees something or he hears something, and those are moments when Connor is like there as a ghost and is with Evan. In those moments, like those brief glimpses that you get, had me so shook. I was like in pain. Felt like knives were being stabbed in my chest. Like it just hurt. I think for me, it felt so weird to have Connor be this new manifestation, to have him be an actual ghost, because I thought that was kind of weird because I was so dead set on the way that Benj and Justin had created Connor in the musical, because I think it was really brilliant, because there was a long period of time where they were struggling with how do we involve this character more in the story, because he's such an important part of it and we want him to be present, but we don't want him to be as a ghost because that could be kind of weird. And so I like the way that they do it in the musical because it makes sense, and it's a really great way of continuing the narrative and getting into Evan's thoughts and his subconscious and allowing Connor to sort of filter his way into the narrative through Evan. But it doesn't really work when you're writing a novel. I think in this case it was probably a smart decision to make Connor a ghost, because that way you're able to see inside his head, you're able to have a lot of things clarified. I think it just makes sense for the narrative, and I think it would be really difficult to depict Connor the way that he's depicted in the musical. I just think they're two completely different narratives and two completely different ways of storytelling, and the way that both narratives are told for Connor's character in the musical and in the book are best fitting for the medium that they're being told. So one of the biggest things that Connor's point of view looks to do is clarify a lot of the misconceived notions about Connor's character that people have perceived to be true. One example that I think is relatively important is a big one that stuck out to me in the musical, which is a story with Connor throwing a printer at his teacher, Mrs. G. So the way that this line is delivered in the musical, and I believe it's from Jared, I pictured Connor picking up this huge printer and like chucking it at his teacher's head, and his teacher having to duck so she doesn't get hit in the face. I pictured it very violent and very aggressive. So we get to hear this story again in the novel, and this time we get to learn more about it from Connor's perspective, and we get a lot more clarification as to what really happened. So for one, Connor was very young when this happened. I don't remember what grade he was in. I know it was young enough that this whole entire incident stemmed from the fact that each kid had a certain job in class or a certain responsibility, and then there was the line leader, and it was supposed to be Connor's turn to be line leader, and he got skipped over. So he tries to tell his teacher, and his teacher ignores him. He wants to go to the front of the line, and the kid that actually is the line leader gets upset, and so Connor grabs the first thing that he can find, and that's the printer, and he picks it up, and it just sort of slides on the floor. It doesn't come anywhere near Miss G. He didn't aggressively throw it. He didn't even get close to hitting her. But it was this moment where he had been skipped over, he'd been ignored, and that's the way that he's always felt. It's like he didn't matter. And so it's this moment where instead of sort of cowering and hiding the way that Evan does, Connor takes out his aggression and his anger. But it's definitely not as gruesome as the way it was described to be. And through this outburst, the teacher sees Connor for the first time and realizes that he's struggling and looks to be there for him. And there's a really beautiful relationship that forms between them because this teacher agrees to look out for Connor and make sure that he's always heard. And if he has any trouble or any difficulties or he's struggling at all, that he can come to his teacher and that the teacher will get to him. Maybe not right away, but she will see him and hear him. And that's so beautiful. There's so many things I love about that story. For one, I love the relationship that develops between student and teacher, and it's the fact that there's a student that's struggling and there's a teacher that's willing to be there for them. That's so beautiful, and it just hits so close to home for me that Connor is at his worst, and this teacher sees that, instead of judging him, does what she can to make him feel seen and heard and validated. That's just so beautiful, because what it tells you is the way that people think of Connor and the way that they've depicted him is not true by any means, and you get to see how fragile and how broken he really is and what things he's really struggled through, and it's just such a great insight into his character and the lies that we've been fed about him and led to believe because of everyone else around him. So there was that, which was a really great moment, and one for me that was really touching. But we're going to talk about the biggest one of all, which is the announcement, the presence of Miguel, because oh my god, when I was reading this, I just lost it, like completely and entirely. And I'm going to be honest, every single one of Connor's chapters from his POV, they were in Roman numerals, so like that's how I knew they were coming up. They weren't regularly numbered like all the rest of the chapters are. Every single time I would get to these Roman numeral chapters, I had to like take a deep breath, close the book, and prepare myself, and then go back into it and start reading, because every single one of them hit me. But this plotline was the one that hit me the most because I just wasn't expecting it at all. And this is really where we get to see the bulk of Connor and his character, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. It really, really did. It hurt excruciatingly. It just was horrible. It was genuinely just, I was speechless. I was in so much pain. Words fail, guys. Words fail. So let's talk about Miguel. He and Connor met at school, and Connor ended up covering for Miguel, and I believe he was doing marijuana, and so Connor said the marijuana was his and not Miguel's, and so he got sent off then to like therapy or like some recovery camp, and then ended up making Connor worse because he didn't need to be there because he was fine, and that sort of prompted a lot of his problems and a lot of his struggles. The relationship then that formed between them, like the jokes and the fact that they just had each other, and that Connor had a friend, and that they were potentially lovers, but Connor just kept pushing Miguel away because he was hurt and he didn't know how to accept his sexuality, and he just really didn't understand, and he always hid his emotions. He never was able to open up. They could have been lovers, but I think that maybe Connor was potentially worried about how his parents would take it. He really wasn't sure and accepting of it himself. There's just all of these things, but they were like a couple, basically. So Connor was queer, and like my heart, it felt like diving down the Tumblr trash chute. Because I had a phase where I was into the Dear Evan Hansen Tumblr because I helped co-run a Dear Evan Hansen fan account on Tumblr. And so I would read a lot of these like headcanons and fan fictions and like, what about this character and what if? One of those things was always like that Connor was queer, or he had like like a lover or he had a friend, and that Evan was just covering for that friend. And so he was just taking the place of somebody else who wasn't willing to step forward and admit that they were friends with Connor. And like, to have that confirmed just felt like so weird and wrong, and I was emotional and I was a mess, and it just broke me. I was hysterically sobbing like when I'm reading this, and like these moments between Connor and Miguel that Connor describes, and like then why Connor did what he did and why he committed suicide because of Miguel, and like him not responding back to the text. If he just like responded back to the text and he didn't, and it just it hurt so much. I was in excruciating amount of pain. I literally don't even know what to say other than just pain is real. It is the thing that I felt reading Connor's chapters and learning about Miguel, but it was so beautiful. But I'm so happy that I know these things about Connor now. It makes me feel so happy, but it's also kind of weird because I felt like I know his character so well from listening to the musical and immersing myself so much in that story, that now to find out all this new information, it feels like I'm one of the Murphys and like I'm having to learn all this new information about Connor for the first time that I never even knew. And it's a weird feeling. It's a very, very weird feeling, but I love getting to learn more about Connor because I feel like he deserved that, and I'm very glad he got that in this novel. And I love Miguel to pieces. We really don't get to see a lot of him, but I would love for him to have like his own story and get to find out more about him and his exploits with Connor. Like, we need to make that a whole story because I need more of it, because the two of them seemed like they were so happy together. If Connor had been a little bit better, if Miguel had been able to break through to him, just there's so many what ifs that could have kept Connor alive. And now that I know them, it's eating me alive and I don't like it and it hurts, but it's fine. So those Connor chapters, they killed me, but they were beautiful and I'm very glad they were added to the story. I loved the addition of Miguel, and I love the conversation at the end between Evan and Miguel. And it's this moment where Evan realizes that there was someone that was there for Connor in a way that he wasn't, because Evan's whole entire shtick, everything that he puts out with the Connor project, is all a lie. So it's this really weird moment where when you first meet Miguel, you learn that he's what Evan is pretending to be. And that's just such a mindfuck, and it's so weird. But having that conversation between the two of them at the very end is very beautiful, and allowing Evan to find out this information, just, it was good. It was very well written. I was very happy with the way the whole thing was arced. It was just so well done, and I needed that new information. It made me so happy because I remember hearing that Connor's point of view was going to be in this novel, and I kind of like brushed it over my head because I was used to the way that the story was told in the musical. Now reading it the way that I did, like, it was just so devastating, especially like the first page. You have this like prologue, and I thought it was like Connor's suicide note at first, but I don't think he wrote a suicide note. But it just was so beautiful and such a great intro to the story, and it just hurt, but it was wonderful. And I'm just obsessed with these Connor chapters. They genuinely are the best thing, and I'm so grateful they were added to this story. So now a few more general things that I want to talk about that are additions or enhancements to this story. I loved getting to find out more of a background on Evan's father and getting to learn the fact that he has a wife and he's going to be having another kid, so that Evan's technically going to end up being a brother. I like getting to see inside Evan's head and getting to have more of a discussion about his father and how that's impacted Evan to have an absent father figure in his life and to not have that someone that's there for him. And then getting to be with the Murphys and having Larry and like the to break in a glove moment, which Evan never got to have with his own father, and Larry wanted the son to be able to have that with and wasn't able to, that they both sort of have that gap and they're able to use each other to fill that gap. It's just very emotional, but I liked getting more of a representation of Evan's father and hearing more of that story, because you don't really get a lot of it in the musical because you have like 3 hours to tell a story, and that's one of those side plot lines that just really doesn't need to be covered to tell the story that needs to be told. But with a novel, you have an unlimited amount of pages. You just gotta write until the story's over, so you had a lot more opportunity to fill that in, and I think it explains a lot as to why Evan is the way he is, and I liked getting that enhanced information because I think it added a lot more to his character and definitely explained a lot of things. So I was happy to see it there because I think it was one of those things that if you're gonna have a novel of the story, you can make enhancements, you could add more to the character, you could tell more of their story. That would be a very big thing to hit on, and it hit on so perfectly, and it was so well done, and I was very happy that that was there. So of course, if we're going to talk about Dear Evan Hansen, we have to talk about the songs in the show because, oh my god, they are wonderful. So when you're novelizing this world, there's songs in it. And it would be really weird for the characters to just randomly pop out into song. It makes sense for a musical because it's a musical, but within a novel, you have to have the characters actually singing in order for the songs to be included. So there are a decent amount of songs from the musical that are sort of just worked in to the novel plot-wise in terms of the fact that the lyrics are brought into conversation, or the way certain things are written, like maybe the actual song isn't there, but what happens during the song plot-wise is present in the novel. None of the songs are really truly lost, but they're coded in there in some way, which I was very happy about. The two songs though that like do stay in the story that are sort of reworked in order for them to be present within the course of the plot are Requiem and Only Us, and those are both songs that Zoe Murphy sings. And she sings Only Us in this cafe where she performs, and I thought that was a really beautiful way to incorporate that in instead of the way that it's written in the musical, because like that makes more sense musical wise, but like I liked the way that it was written in the novel because it makes more sense for the novel, and I like the way Requiem was written, that Zoe just goes into her room, takes out her guitar and starts playing, and you have Connor who's watching her. It's just, oh my god, like everything, the way that all the songs were incorporated in, just it was so well done. I just couldn't be more happy, and like it just in general with the way that the entire plot was arced, the way that the musical was brought into this novel, because they're both relatively similar. The only changes that are made are the ones that need to be made for the sake of the fact that you're telling the story in a novel, and there's just certain enhancements that need to be made then because of that, which is what I go into in my non-spoiler review about. I'm very, very happy with that. Genuinely, I have like no complaints about the way that the musical was adapted into the novel, and certain things I felt like were lost. The story is almost exactly the same, just changes that are made for the sake of writing a novel and novelizing a story, and what methods would be easier to tell through writing than it would be through a Broadway musical where you have a lot more visual aspects there. So there's one particular scene that I want to hit on that was added to the book that is not in the musical that I thought was just perfect for both of the characters and for moving the plot along. It was just a really great addition of setting, and that is when Evan takes Zoe to Ellison Park. My heart, it was just such a great scene, and one of the things that I really loved about it is that it's so perfect because you get to see more of Evan and his love of trees, and you get to learn more about Zoe and like the fact that she ran away to Ellison Park once. It was just so perfect, and I loved it because again, it's taking these things about the characters that we know about them from the musical, but adding on to them and giving the characters more layers and more depths and getting to explore that more than you would be able to in a musical where you have a very short time frame to be able to do all of that. So it was just a really beautiful scene, and I really loved it, and I think of all the scenes in the book, it was the one that stood out the most to me because it wasn't in the musical at all, and it was the one that I feel like was the best incorporated, made the most sense, and was just so well done. And I was very happy reading the entire thing. My heart was just swelling because it was such a well-written scene, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So moving on to the ending, there's a lot of stuff that goes down in the end of this book, but there's one significant change that I want to talk about because I already discussed the conversation between Miguel and Evan, which is a change from the musical to the book, but the biggest thing that stood out to me, the one that hit me the most, is this reconciliation between Jared and Evan, because I just honestly was not expecting it at all. In the musical, we have Good For You, which is one of the last songs in the show, and it's this moment where Jared and Heidi and Alana all go up at Evan and basically say, you've become obsessed with living this lie and been obsessed with the Murphy family, trying to be their new son and trying to like fit yourself to be a part of this fictional happy family, that you're ignoring your real friends and ignoring your real responsibilities and letting yourself live a lie instead and be obsessed with the idea of social media, me seen and being heard, that you don't care about the people who are closest to you and who matter most to you. And in this moment, Jared and Evan have a really heated conversation, and it ends with Jared pretty much running off and saying, fuck you, asshole, and that's where everything ends between those two characters, and there is no reconciliation. It's just left on that really tense and heated moment, and I love this show so much, but that was the one thing of all things that irritated me immensely, because I wanted something, anything, to be able to just confirm like what happens between these two characters. Is there any reconciliation? Is there maybe not one at all? But it's just left with nothing. Like, you have no answers, and that's just the worst, and I hated it because I wanted to know what happened between these two characters. I needed something, and so I finally got that in this novel. But I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't expecting a reconciliation at all, because from what I remember, the cast and crew of Dear Evan Hansen did a town hall for SiriusXM. One of the things that they talked about during that panel and during that conversation was that, at least to Benj and Justin's ideas as to what happens after the show and what happens with these characters, and at least to Will Rowland, who was the original Broadway cast member that played Jared, Evan and Jared never had any reconciliation. They just sort of fought, and then after everything happened between those two characters, apparently there was no coming back from that. So I figured if that was their interpretation, that there's no way that we would see anything different in this book, because I would believe that Benj and Justin would have enough of interpretation that if they didn't want it there, it wouldn't be there, and so there would be no reconciliation between the two characters. So that's what I was expecting going into this novel, and I was really surprised to see that there is a little bit of a reconciliation between them, where they do talk after everything, and they have this moment where, despite the really heated argument that they had in the really heated way that they left off, they're still okay, and it's sort of fine, and it's simmering, and maybe things are never going to be the same between them, but it's just a really beautiful moment of like, okay, yes, this isn't perfect, but we're going to work through it, and I think that they still remain friends, at least from the interpretation that I get from the novel, and it was just so beautiful, and I love the way that ended. It was the ending that I wanted and needed, and it made me so happy to read that. It was just truly beautiful, because I genuinely love Jared, and I think he's one of my favorite characters because he is so complex. This is the guy who laughed during a lesson on the Holocaust. Jared is a horrible person, and he's a jerk, and he's mean, but that's because he has lots of insecurities, and so he likes to sort of liven his life up a little bit and tell these stories about how, oh, he got to second base with a girl at camp where he did this and he did that, to try to make himself look better, because in reality he is a little bit of a loser, he has no friends, and he is that guy in the back the way that Evan is, but he doesn't want to admit to that, and he has a different way of dealing with it than Evan does, and he uses his aggression, sort of his witty personality, to take it out on other people. And so when Evan starts to develop this fame and starts to have the Murphy family, Jared starts to realize that he is really alone in a way that Evan was alone. That's just such a huge moment, and that's why the whole Sincerely Me reprise really hurts, because it's this moment where Jared wants to put himself into the friendship, he doesn't want to feel alone, and Evan shoves him away, and you're starting to see that this character has feelings, that he is alone, and he's so complex. I remember when I did the Meteor Book Freakout tag, I said that one of my favorite characters, one that I just absolutely love and adore, is Jared Kleiman, and now he is a fictional character that people can fall in love with, and they can see and understand the complexities of his character in the way that I did, and it just made me so happy that they had some sort of reconciliation, because it made me love his character so much more, it made me feel so less unsettled, and it was just exactly what I wanted and needed, and it made me so happy. You do not even know. It was genuinely like the big thing. If I could have gotten anything out of this book, it had to have been that, and the Connor chapters are like two of my favorite things from this novelization and the additions to the world of Dear Evan Hansen. Okay, so that's about it for my review of Dear Evan Hansen novel, and I barely even touched the surface, but there's just so many things that happen in this book and in the story in this world, and I could spend hours discussing them with all of you. So if you do have any questions, and if you want to fangirl together, you can leave your comments down below about the book, and I will try to answer them for all of you. If you're wondering about, like, does this happen in the Broadway musical or not, if you've never been exposed to the Broadway musical, I can answer all your questions there. We can fangirl and we can discuss. I would love to know your thoughts on Dear Evan Hansen the novel, so please, please, please leave them down below. If you want to find out more about Dear Evan Hansen, I will be leaving a whole bunch of information in the description for you to go and find out more about this world and the story and support the creators, because it's a truly, truly, truly great story. It's one that's absolutely touched my heart, and I'm so grateful to be supporting it. Thank you so much to Teenreads and Novel for making this review happen. Their information will be down below. So many wonderful things in the description for you to go and check out. So go and check out the description. My social media is also down there, and places where you can contact me are down below. Go and check that out. Whew. But I think with that all out of the way, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new one. Goodbye!
Broadway, here I